What is going on YouTube? Gabmus here and welcome to the 5th episode of the Tech Pills weekly live stream. So first off, Happy New Year everyone. I hope you spent some nice holidays while I was gone. I certainly did. And let's start off with the news for this new year of 2020. So right now at Las Vegas, there's been the CES like every year, and as every year we've been seeing some pretty crazy and innovative, at least some innovative stuff, and this year is no less. So let's start off with the first news of today, and really the first block of news that's best from CES. So the first news here is that Dell announced a new XPS Developer Edition refresh with the new Intel Ice Lake CPUs. And overall, it's more of the same, really. We've been knowing the XPS 13 for a while now. I even did a review of the Skylake model a couple of years ago. And this new model here has a larger trackpad and a 16 by 10 aspect ratio screen, which is pretty nice. Something that's interesting is that it has a fingerprint reader, and that will allegedly work on Linux, or at least in the version of Ubuntu that Dell ships. But the nicest thing, in my opinion, for this new model of the XPS 13 is that Dell felt so confident of this Linux lineup that they actually decided to show it at the show floor at CES alongside the other Windows powered XPS models, which is pretty great in my opinion. So just a quick note here, I'm happy to see that Dell is investing more into the Developer Edition lineup, and possibly next year or Computex we'll see more Linux powered stuff from Dell. Who knows? But let's move on to the next topic. And we're still talking about Dell. I'm sorry. Sorry for that. I had a bit of a cold and I'm not still 100% yet. So anyway, we still have some news from Dell. So at this year's CES, they showed some pretty interesting new concepts for new they're still PCs in a way, but they have a very different style and look from what you would expect from a normal PC. And apart from the usual stuff, like more the same again, like new gaming monitors, new Alienware laptops, and yada yada yada, all that stuff like that. New refreshes of new laptops, of really the same laptops. But again, the real nice thing here is the concepts that Dell and Alienware showed at this year's CES. And let's start off with the Alienware concept UFO. So this is a pretty wild concept PC. It's basically, it's a Nintendo Switch, let's put it clear, but it's a PC. And that's enough to really describe what we're talking about here. It's a tablet form factor PC that's very likely running a traditional x86 CPU. And it has these two detachable controllers, just like the Nintendo Switch. And of course, since we live still in a very proprietary software oriented world, this thing is running Windows 10. But the fact that it is running Windows leads me to believe that it's actually x86, and that we could have the possibility of installing a mainstream Linux distribution like Arch, and have a device like this to be basically a very portable, very interesting gaming Linux machine on the go. And they also presented like let's see if we can find something more. There you have it. It also has a kickstand, so you can just prop it up and You can use an adapter. There we go, to use like the two Joy-Con style controller pieces as a unique controller, which is pretty cool. And of course, you can dock it, but that's a thing that you can do with basically any PC. So you can just dock it to a TV or a larger monitor and use it like that. And of course, that's gonna work. I'm not sure what kind of hardware they're running. I hope it's Ryzen, but honestly, I'm more oriented towards thinking it's possibly an Intel Ice Lake CPU. Some more concepts from Dell. They are, well, less interesting, to be honest, but still pretty noteworthy. Are the concept Ori, which is this weird, well, it's a tablet, okay? But it's foldable and it folds like to, and you can prop it up to use it like a standard laptop device. It's weird. I don't know if this thing will actually be useful or if it will come out in the market at all. And in fact, Dell wants to know for all of these concepts if these ideas are actually interesting for the market or not. It's a cool idea and they have working prototypes, and from what reviewers have said that have been to CES and seen these devices, the quality looks actually pretty promising. But again, this is to me more of a gimmick than anything else, but still pretty interesting. And the other concept that they showed, Concept Duet, is actually more well, I kind of like it more than the previous one. This is, well, it's your standard laptop form factor, except instead of having a keyboard deck and the trackpad, you have two screens, two touch screens. And I think this is the more useful and usable form factor. And they also show that you have like an attachable keyboard that you can put onto the bottom screen and you use it. And like the, of course, this is software, it's a software implementation, but the portion of the screen that's covered by the keyboard will be detected and will be basically well, it won't work. Like you won't be able to accidentally do touches on the part that has the keyboard on top of it. And if you put the keyboard on the top of the device, the bottom part becomes the trackpad, which is pretty nice. Honestly, this has quite a lot of potential uses in my opinion. Of course, having two screens greatly improves productivity, as you probably already know. But also, I think the nice use case would be to prop it up vertically and to use a wireless mouse and keyboard and use it as a dual screen vertical programming setup on the go, which is honestly, it's pretty interesting of an idea. Anyway, let's see what the chat has to say. The Lemon Linux, okay, no, OB, Happy New Year, thanks. And he says that's pretty cool. What? That's what I was going to say. Well, a Switch clone? Yeah, exactly. Honestly, the concept of the Switch is pretty interesting. Of course, since it's a console and it's closed source and it's more of a toy than anything else. It's sad that the Switch itself is so limited. So it's understandable that other companies want to extend and expand on that idea and see where they can go from that. And I think that Alienware is trying to bring to the market something that's actually very interesting. And if I had the money, because at the end of the day that's what it boils down to, I would probably buy something like that. I wouldn't be using it necessarily as a pure gaming machine. Of course, I will install Linux on it and I will play a whole lot of Linux games. Like mostly lightweight games are pretty cool. Like I see myself playing Magic the Gathering Arena on that, or Enter the Gungeon, or even Slay the Spire, or well, Starbound. I could go on for ages. I have an actually pretty extensive list of lightweight games I would love to play on a device like that. The Lemon Linux, which is back from rebooting, says, "If I wonder if you can install Linux in that folding tablet so you can have a foldable Linux distro." Uh, well, I think to some extent you can install Linux on that, but the question becomes how useful is it going to be? Because you will probably need to have some special tailored software to make the best out of it, because having the fold work as it does in the Windows implementation would be kind of challenging. And of course, the big problem here is that these companies always announce very interesting concepts and very weird and well, new ideas, but at the end of the day they're developing the software on top of Windows, which is very sad, but that's the reality we're living in. So you probably could install Linux on that, but I don't know how useful that would be. Let's move on to the next news. So, another nice thing that was announced at CES, kind of more of the same of what we've seen the last year, but still pretty interesting. Ryzen 4000 laptop CPUs have been announced. And this 4000 series of CPUs is based on the Zen 2 architecture and their APUs, so they have an integrated graphics card, but that's not based on Navi, it's still based on Vega. It's Vega 7 nanometers, so it's still better than the old Vega we're used to, but it's still Vega, which I mean, for integrated graphics, it's probably fine, and it's miles ahead of anything with, like, it's still a lot better than anything Intel has to offer in terms of integrated GPUs, so that's still pretty good. But the more interesting thing here is that these new CPUs are both high-end, so they presented two series, the H series and the U series. And the H series, just kind of like the Intel naming for the laptop parts, are the more high-end parts destined to content creators and gamers and all the kind of stuff. And the U parts are less powerful but more power efficient and oriented towards consumer and ultrabook laptops. This is a very interesting announcement, also considering that according to the early benchmarks that we're getting, these new CPUs match, if not surpass, Intel CPUs for basically the same market area that they're trying to occupy. So hopefully in this new year of 2020 we'll see more Ryzen laptops, because even if in the desktop space Ryzen has been like so big recently, in the laptop space there's still lots of Intel, and I would really love to see more AMD. Moving on to the next news, Intel announced now this is a very difficult story to explain. Intel announced a new NUC, and if you don't know what NUCs are, they're basically these microcomputers, like very small computers with laptop parts that you can kind of assemble yourself. They provide you the shell and the CPU, and you provide the RAM and the hard drive, and you have basically a very small desktop PC. I always like NUCs because they're very interesting and can be useful in a variety of different scenarios. But this year they announced a very different NUC. It's in the form factor of a PCI Express card. Okay, so stay with me here. This is the actual NUC. This card on the right of the image. And it's basically a PCI Express card. But it's not made to be plugged in your PCI Express card in your PC. Instead, it's made to work with an enclosure like this. And there are multiple ones, one from Intel, one from Cooler Master, and another one or other ones from other brands that I don't remember. But anyway, you just plug the NUC on in the blue socket, PCIe socket, in this daughter board inside the case, and then you have other PCI Express expansion slots, like you have in this picture here. You have a by 16 slot, I believe that's an M.2 slot, and a by 4 slot. And you can basically plug, in this particular instance, up to 3 PCI Express devices, including a full-size GPU, like a full-blown desktop class GPU. Of course, it has to fit the case, and this is the Intel case, I believe. The Cooler Master one is a bit longer, so it fits bigger graphics cards, and the case also has supplementary power for GPU. So if you need that to power the graphics card, that's you can do that, no problem. And that's a very interesting concept. It's nothing really too new, because it's still a NOC and it's still a PC with a graphic with PCIe connectivity, which is not, again, nothing new. But the nice thing is that this will bring probably desktop class computers with full-blown graphics cards, and the possibility of further expansion, like if you wanted to install like a capture card from Blackmagic or Magewell, you can do that here. And but in a form factor that's even smaller than Mini ITX, which is very interesting. And I wouldn't personally have a use for that, but I know that many people would. So it's progress, and it's, again, very interesting to see. So here's that. Let's see what chat is talking about. Lemon Linux says, I got a Ryzen 5 3500. Holy hell, that's a big, very nice CPU. Congrats. With a Radeon Vega on my laptop, and it's really great. Oh, it's 3500 on a laptop, so it's I believe it's Zen Plus, which is not Zen 2, but it's still pretty good architecture, and it's really great. Someday when it's time to buy a new laptop, I'm buying another Ryzen. I'm here with you on this, Lemon Linux. I think that Ryzen is really, as of right now, the best CPU family you can buy, both for the money and in terms of performance. They basically have the whole market range, from very low end stuff to very high end stuff with the Threadripper series. And if you want to go higher than that, you can go with Epic, and that's very impressive to see AMD in the market again as a dominant force. And to be honest, I'm happy to see that Intel is no longer a monopoly. And even if I only have Intel CPUs in my systems, because, well, one was a donation and the other one I bought before Ryzen was a thing. I think that the next CPU I will buy will probably be, well, not probably, but will probably 90% be Ryzen, unless Intel does something really extraordinary, but I don't think they will. So anyway, let's move on to the next topic of today, and we're talking about AMD again. And AMD announces the RX 5600 GPU, 5600 XT. So if you don't know, the new Navi family of AMD GPUs has been out since summer 2019, I believe, and we've been seeing the 2700 and 2700 XT. They're very nice GPUs, but they're kind of in more of the mid to high end tier. And now they're in Q4 of 2019, they announced the 5500, which is a lower end graphics card, practically on par with the Radeon 580, the Polaris GPU they previously had. And now they're announcing the 5600 XT as a next step towards like a more mid-tier GPU. So the 5600 XT is marketed as the quote ultimate 1080p GPU, and I don't really like these marketing terms, but whatever. What are you gonna do? And it's practically made to compete with the 1660 Ti from Nvidia. And even in benchmarks, it's well, at least from the benchmarks that AMD released, it's very close to the 1660 Ti. It actually surpasses it, like it has like 10 or 20% more performance than the 1660 Ti, but it's basically on that in that market area. And even for the price, it's 280 USD MSRP, so just about the price of the 1660 Ti with more performance. And it's AMD, so if you're a Linux user, you know you want to go with AMD. So it's very nice to see more GPUs to fill in the market gaps from AMD, and it will probably be a great card for mid to high-end gaming, like not as good as the 5700 XT, of course, or the 5700 for that matter, but good enough to bring you 1080p Ultra at 60 or probably even 144 FPS, and possibly even 2K at 60 Hertz if you turn down some settings. I can tell you that 2K 1440p is pretty playable at 60 if you turn down your settings, because I played at 1440p with a 960. So I think that's doable with a card like this. As for the hardware, it's mostly a 5700, which is weird when you first think about it, but when you go deeper into the actual specs, you start to understand where the difference is and where the difference in price is. It has the same compute units and stream processors as the 5700 non-XT, and it has also a lower clock compared to the 5700. So most of the performance loss is there compared to the 5700, but that could be probably matched with overclocking. But the big bottleneck here, or well, the big market differentiator, is the memory configuration. You see, the 5600 XT will have a memory that's a bit slower with a lower bus width, and it's also going to be less memory. It's going to be 6 gigabytes instead of 8, but that's not too big of a deal. And about the memory configuration, it will have a 12 gigabit per second bus speed compared to the 15 gigabits per second on the 5700 and 5700 XT, and a bus width of 192 bits compared to the 256 bits of the 5700. So there's your difference. I think it's a very good decision to actually do some market fragmentation, because they're not actually using like they're not actually artificially limiting the GPU itself or the actual hardware that they're using. They're just using probably cheaper memory, and considering that the clocks are lower, they're probably using lower quality silicon for the actual GPUs. But that's fine, because at the end of the day, you have to use the quote-unquote worse GPUs in some way. So it's a very nice way for AMD to actually bring something new to the market. So let's see what the chat has to do. The links again about the Ryzen laptop he has. I got this laptop on Black Friday sale. It was $600 and got it for $400. Wow, that's a very big discount. I couldn't say no to that. My ThinkPad wasn't even a break. Yeah, ThinkPads are kind of overrated. Well, depending on what you have to do. They're great machines, but Ryzen, come on. We need Ryzen. Used to be an Intel fan, but now I'm Team Red. It works with Linux out of the box. Okay, about being a fan of a particular brand. I just wanted to open a, like, you brought me this topic on hand. I just wanted to say a few words on it. I know you're probably joking about being a fan as a thing, but there are people who are actually aligned to companies, and I don't like the term, like the idea of being a fan of a particular brand, because I didn't like AMD back when they had basically no support for Linux. Now they do have great support for Linux, and I'm buying their products. It's not like I don't like AMD because I'm an Nvidia fan or I am an Intel fan and I don't want to buy the products because they hate them or something. I just didn't like the products that they were offering. Now that they're offering great products, I will buy products from them. That's all there is to it. And same thing with Intel. If Intel comes out with a 7 nanometer new architecture that actually blows away Ryzen for a competitive price, probably gonna go with Intel again. And same thing with Nvidia. If Nvidia decides that they want to go the AMD route and release the drivers as open source, or maybe just an open core for the kernel driver and a user space driver on top of that, like AMD is doing, I could be fine with that as long as they're using standard technologies. And the thing with Nvidia is a little bit different because Nvidia likes to do out of standard things that I don't really like, like CUDA, for instance. Where did they talk about this some episodes ago? Anyway, it's probably well known that I don't like the out of standard things that Nvidia does, because I like my standards, and if the standard for compute is OpenCL, I don't want to use CUDA because CUDA only works on Nvidia GPUs. And I don't know if Nvidia will always be an option, or if Nvidia tomorrow just goes bankrupt for some reason and they make no more products. I'm stuck having learned a now useless language because I cannot use it on GPUs that are not Nvidia or other compute devices for that matter. Anyway, I digress. I just don't like to be a fan of a particular brand, because at the end of the day, brands, companies, the only objective is to make money, and if they need a good product to make money, that's what they're gonna do. And it's not like they are particularly invested, or it's difficult to have a company that sees more than profit in what they're doing, just because we're living in a capitalist world, and that's how capitalism works. But that's a topic for another day. Anyway, let's go on. Let's keep reading the chat. Anas Eljondi, I probably butchered your name. Anyway, always liked AMD more than Intel, as it's been the innovative company out of there between the two. You're actually right. Oh, sorry. So what I was saying, you're actually right, because AMD actually did some, well, most of the innovation we've been seeing in the last decade or more probably in the CPU market has been from AMD, which is weird. AMD brought us the AMD 64 architecture, which is the architecture we're now using for 64-bit x86 computers. And they brought us more the concept of having more cores on our computers, and they've been always playing this game of catch up with Intel, where AMD announces something that's truly revolutionary, and then Intel tries to catch up, and eventually Intel does catch up and surpasses AMD greatly. Then AMD creates a bad product line and they go dark for a while, and Intel becomes a monopoly. Then AMD wakes up from the dead, and they start competing again, and Intel is just oh my god, that we need to catch up again, and they play this stupid game they've been playing for a while now, and I don't really like it, because I would really love to see Intel innovate more and not play catch up, and not like this old monopoly thing with Intel, and previously even with Nvidia. Well, Nvidia is still kind of more of a monopoly for graphics cards, because they still have faster graphics cards overall compared to AMD. But anyway, when a company becomes a monopoly, they stop to innovate, and that's the very big problem, because if there's no innovation, the market is stuck, and you see new product releases that are more of the same with no many changes. And that's what we've been seeing with any processor from Skylake to today, as far as Intel goes, and with from Maxwell or maybe Pascal to Turing for NVIDIA graphics cards, they're mostly the same. We've been seeing small incremental changes, but that's not a whole lot. So that's the reality of monopolies. Anyway, let's go on to the next topic, and we're back to talk about Intel, and we're talking about an Intel GPU this time, which is pretty funny. Intel announced their first dedicated GPU, and yes, I'm spelling that right. It's graphical processing unit. It's the Intel DG1XE, and it's unimpressive. Yeah, okay, it's an interesting concept. They have a proper dedicated GPU that slots into a PCI Express expansion port, but the early benchmarks that we're seeing are unimpressive. Gamers Nexus actually did a benchmark using a high-speed camera and counting frames, and just go ahead and look for the Gamers Nexus video. I won't spoil that for you. They deserve the views. They're a great YouTube channel if you care about hardware. Anyway, again, unimpressive for 1080p performance. The GPU that they actually presented is like a very small GPU with one fan and no auxiliary power, so that's probably an indication that it's a low-end card. And I hope that they have something they're still working on for this GPU lineup. Maybe that's just like a prototype or a demo of the actual tech, and soon enough we'll see the actual high-end version of that. Who knows? Anyway, that's it for the CES coverage from me. There's a lot more news. If you're interested, just don't look at look at my channel for CES news. I just wanted to bring you the things that I was more interested in and the things that I thought are not more noteworthy. And so let's move on to some more familiar news, some Linux news. So the first topic in the Linux section I want to cover today is GTherm. GTherm will bring easier component temperature monitoring on Linux. And this is apparently a project from Purism, of all companies. Anyway, they're building this architecture called GTherm, which is basically a daemon that collects temperature information across the system and exposes it via a dbus interface. And it also comes with a library called libgtherm with gobject introspection. If you don't know what that means, it's basically the way you develop applications for GNOME. So you have gobjects and you can interact with them. It's just the API. So if you're not a programmer, you probably don't care about this stuff. But anyway, the point is that they're making it really easy to actually be able to use this new library, particularly for GNOME apps. And so you can use this libgtherm library to prop the GTherm daemon and get the temperatures. And that's actually pretty interesting. They're doing this apparently for the Librem 5 so that they can actually monitor the temperatures in the device more easily. And some implementations include the GTHCLI, which is simple command line utility that basically exposes the temperatures of the devices that GTherm can read, and soon they will include support for GTherm in GNOME usage, which is pretty interesting. Now, the interesting part about this news is that if you're doing any overclocking, monitoring temperatures is actually a very important part of it, because you need to know if your system is exceeding a certain temperature, and if so, you need to tune your overclocking, maybe tune your voltage down a bit or your clock. And having a unified interface for monitoring temperatures is a very good idea, and it's something that we still don't have in Linux. There's P sensors, okay, but that tries to collect information from very different places, and it doesn't always succeed in doing so. And anyway, it's not that easy either for users nor for developers, and depending on the device, that can be problematic. While having a unified interface, like a single API to refer to, in this case GTherm could be what we're looking for, can be really easy, because if I'm an app developer making like a temperature monitoring app, I can just target GTherm and hope that they have support for the sensors that I want to probe. So it's actually pretty cool. and I hope this project will actually be working as they intend to, because this is something I would really want to use. And as soon as I can get my hands on it, I will probably think about making some apps with it. If nothing else, just for fun. Let's see. Let's see what the chat is saying. Um, I think most of that came from tinkering with Librem phone more than Librem computers. You don't want a phone that will toast your side. Yeah, I think that this is made for the Librem 5 as well. Also because in the announcement blog, I'll just show you the screen right now. In the announcement blog, they're actually showing a screenshot of a supposedly unreleased version of GNOME usage. If you don't know, this is GNOME usage, and they added this new terminal section, which and as you see, this is the shell of the Librem 5. So this is either the true Librem 5 or a virtual machine or something like that. But anyway, it's clear that they're doing this for the Librem 5. Anyway, let's move on to the next news for today, and that's Torvalds discourages using ZFS on Linux. And this is a new story from the Linux mailing list. And the story goes that Torvalds was responding to an email asking about a change in the kernel breaking compatibility with ZFS. And this is not the first time that something like this happens, and the Linux developer community has already been pretty clear on the fact that ZFS, that Linux cannot support ZFS officially. And Linus says that he cannot support third-party modules in the Linux kernel if they're not part of the Linux kernel. And if you install a third-party module, you're on your own, which is a pretty fair stance to me. He adds saying that ZFS was always more of a buzzword than anything else. And the benchmarks that he's seen do not make ZFS look all that great. Now, I'm not big into file systems or NASes or servers for that matter, so I don't have the competence yet nor the experience to say if ZFS is actually the superior file system, as many are saying, particularly recently. I honestly don't know if ZFS is all that good, and hearing something like this from Torvalds makes me wonder if it's actually worth the hype. I don't know. Maybe it's time we move on to something else. At the end of the day, this has to do more with the licensing than anything else. Maybe on the technical side, ZFS isn't actually all that bad. Maybe it's actually great. But the problem with licensing is Oracle, because we all know how litigious Oracle is. And Torvalds said, and let me actually pull up the mailing list article here. Honestly, there is no way I'm quoting here right now from Torvalds. And honestly, there is no way I can merge any of these ZFS efforts until I get an official letter from Oracle that is signed by their main legal counsel, or preferably by Larry Ellison himself, that says, yes, it is okay to do so and treat the end result as GPL'd. And that's practically all there is to it. It's not wise to use Oracle technology, even if it's some form of open source, but even in this case, they cannot even include it in the Linux kernel because it's not GPL and it cannot go into the Linux kernel. So I don't know. I personally agree with the stance Torvalds has taken. The last thing I would see is legal problems between Oracle and the Linux kernel developer community. That's just something we don't want to happen. We don't want to see happening. Let's see what the chat has to say on this topic. Oh, okay. They're still talking about phones. Lemon Linux says, I'm still excited for PinePhone. I'm going to get it even if it doesn't work with Verizon. I want to have a Linux phone I can play with. I know. I want that PinePhone as well. I just want it so much, but it's still pretty early in my opinion. I want to just see where it goes, and I want to see some actual reviews from people I trust. Or more than trust, I want to see more extensive reviews and more long-term reviews, particularly for battery life. That's possibly my biggest main concern. And I would actually rock it as a main phone. I will still bring my Android phone around, but I will put my SIM card into the Pine phone. And if I needed anything out of my Android phone, I could just use the hotspot from activate like the Wi-Fi hotspot from the Pine phone, because that's probably possible, and just use the Wi-Fi on the Android device and just turn it off once I don't need it anymore, which also limits greatly the privacy invasion surface area. Anna says, agree, I'm more excited by Pine 64 phone watch and Pinebook Pro. Yeah, the watch too. I haven't been hearing much of the watch recently. Probably they're working on it behind the scenes. Let's see where that goes. That's another very interesting thing, and that is gonna go so the cost of the watch would be so low that I'll probably buy one just for the heck of it. We need to move to ARM-based laptops like 3 years ago. I don't want. I don't know. I don't know about that. ARM is a very interesting tech, but it's not as standard as x86. Maybe because x86 has just two companies making CPUs. Well, three considering VIA, but I mean, on x86 you can run anything. You have BIOS, you have bootloaders. On ARM, it's still a bit sketchy to the point that you have to make distributions or, well, operating system images specifically for a specific piece of hardware, which is something I really don't like. But yeah, until they fix these problems with ARM, and I don't think they will ever, I don't see ARM going as big as x86. Possibly RISC-V, maybe Power 9, the Power architecture. Who knows? Lime Linux, I'm waiting till it fully comes out with their own OS, not a dev kit. I forgot about the watch. We all forgot about the watch. No, I actually didn't. I just put it in the back of my mind. But if we don't need anything about it, it's no news. So nothing to think about, right? All right, let's move on to the next and final news for today, and that's KDE planning a UI overhaul for Plasma. And so apparently KDE is working on improving their Breeze theme. Um, okay, I mean, Breeze is actually one of the nicest default themes, but I can see where they can improve, and they say they're working on improving it and building on top of it, which is very nice, very interesting. And most importantly, one of the biggest offending factors of Plasma as a desktop is that the look and feel overall, at least in my opinion, isn't all that great. Functionality wise, it's awesome, but usability and look and feel just doesn't work, at least for me, and well, for many other people that think it like me. Anyway, one of the most notable changes that they want to do is they're working towards changing the behavior or the default launcher kickoff to be more icon centric and overall less cluttered. And this is a very welcome change, in my opinion, because if you've been using KDE with the default app launcher, I don't know how you can do it. It's just so, it's cluttered, and it looks old, it feels old to use. It doesn't match the current generation interaction. The way you need to you used to interact with an app launcher these days is with icons, and it also makes more sense than having lists and submenus that you have to navigate. Just having lists of icons makes more sense. It's more glanceable, it's overall more user friendly, at least in my opinion it is. But I think this is a very welcome change, And anyway, you can still change the app launcher on Plasma, so that's a welcome change. Not too big of a deal. It's a big deal in the sense that it's gonna be the default, so that's very nice, and I'm happy to see that they're working towards uncluttering the UI, because that's the main problem in Plasma. It's admirable to see all of these efforts, but they still need to work, I think, on overall app usability and the overwhelming amount of menus and buttons that most of the time you just don't know what they do, and that breaks user experience, in my opinion. I think that does. And I don't know. I would like to be able to use Plasma, but it's just not for me. I love the technical side of it. I love that it's fast and lightweight and it's technically well made, but I just can't use it. It's usability wise, it's not for me. Let's see what chat has to say. Oh, okay, we've been joined by the FernoS dev. Hey, you came a little bit late to a party, but you're still welcome. Okay, so Anas says, I mean, for people that Chromebooks are more than enough. Internet, media content, and spreadsheets. ARM CPUs are more than enough. It needs some polishing to get there. Okay, yes, you have a fair point. I mean, as far as standard usage of a laptop, we're there with ARM. It's just that's to do with raw actually compute power, and we're pretty much there. But as far as flexibility and usability goes, I personally wouldn't buy something like that, because I would be limited. My choice of operating system would be limited to what actually supports the device, and once that device goes end of life, I have no guarantee that support isn't just going to end on them. While with an x86 system or any other kind of standard system that behaves in the same way of x86, I can have a 10-year-old computer, but I can still update my operating system and use a mainline operating system, no problem. Let's move on. The FernoS dev says, alright, just presenting FernoS Classic for Linux Mint, preparing FernoS Classic for Linux Mint 19.3 update. Great. And that says again, a launcher that takes your whole computer screen is hideous. No, they're not taking your whole computer screen. It's just gonna be a small window, but it's gonna be icon centric. Let me actually show you a screenshot of that. I need to. Okay. Oh god. What did I read about that? All right. Let me actually show you a screenshot. There you go. You see? Okay, I don't know if this is functional, if it's just a mock-up, but that's how it's supposedly gonna behave. So just have your quote-unquote start button or launch up button, whatever, and you have a search bar, which is pretty useful. And I'm just guessing that if you just press super and start typing, it's just gonna work. And then you have your sections, as always. I don't know about these sections, I never really like them, but you have all applications, which is okay, and favorites, which is useful. And you can just, you have an icon grid, which is more usable in my opinion, and more, well, it's also more visually appealing if you want to. The FernoS dev says, oh, and if you've seen the kickoff concepts, you might have also noticed the warning, wanting to redesign Dolphin 2 a bit. I didn't see, I didn't hear anything about that. Probably that's to do with the fact that I glanced through the article and didn't read it too carefully. But that's a very welcome change. I mean, Dolphin is a great file manager, and still it suffers from the same things, from the usual problems of KDE apps too cluttered, too many menus, too many buttons, too many things on your face. And if you're actually redesigning it, that's a pretty good thing. I don't know if the screenshot I showed contains the dolphin redesign. I think it does, because it doesn't look like dolphin, but well, it can look like dolphin. Well, dolphin can look like that, but I don't know if this is actually dolphin, like the redesign. Anyway, I'm glad that they're working towards more usability and less clutter on their desktop. Let's see where that goes. Anna says, okay, that's kind of okay. Yeah, it's okay. It looks good. Better than the clutter Windows start menu. Yeah, that's for sure. Alright, guys. I think that's it for today. We covered all the topics we have to cover, and we're just about the 1 hour mark. So thank you very much, guys, for joining me. Thanks for watching, and thanks for being here with me for the live stream. If you like this video, please make sure to press the thumbs up button down there. Also remember to subscribe to my channel if you want more of this, and remember to join the TechPills community at techpills.technology/community. We have a Telegram channel, Telegram group, a Discord server, and I will see you next week, same day, same time. And I just this outro thing, I just don't it just always feels kind of weird to me, particularly in the live stream. But anyway, that's what it is. Thanks again, guys, for joining me. Thanks for watching. I'll be seeing you guys in the next one.